fastest ones don't always win. It's the one who outlasts the competition, the one who never quits. But what if the race isn't just about you? What if the grind, hard work, and sacrifice of your every step is meant to pave the way for the one who comes after you? Your preparation, relentless effort, and perseverance become somebody else's starting point. And when you cross the finish line, you realize it's not the finish line at all. Your legacy lives on. You're just getting started. You're an outlaster.
I love that. I love that. So are you an outlaster? Is that what you are? Hey, we are in part 2 of this series that I'm really excited about, and I'm excited to see you guys here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for joining us online. It's a series we kicked off last week that we said is all about running the race of this life well, running it with the focus and the determination, the effort, the resilience required to actually win. But then we said last week that raises right there, that word raises a question, and it's an important question for all of us. And that question is simply, so what's the win? I mean, if I want to run the race of life in such a way that I win, what actually is the win of a well-lived life? And isn't it true that in a game, the win is always well-defined, right? Whether it's a board game, card game, sports game, the win is always well-defined. If you're ever learning a game for the first time, one of the first things you want to know is, how do you win? Like, what's the win at the end of the game? What wins the game? Because it's always going to be defined. You know what you're competing for. You know what and who you're competing against. But life is not like that. Life is not like a game. And often the win is not clear. And in fact, it's not even obvious. In fact, often the win is actually counterintuitive. And so it's a great question to ask. What's the win? It's a great question to ask in every area of life, really in every season of your life. When I get to the end of this season, what will the win be? But I said last week, it's an even better question to ask in terms of your whole life. Your whole life, what is the win of a well-run race? What is the win of a well-lived life? And last week we took a look at a true outlaster. I mean, seriously, this person is one of the most influential people in all of history. Talk about someone whose life outlived and outlasted them. His name is Paul, and we looked at how Paul answered that question. And for him, it was people. The win was people, his life rippling into, like the ripple effect of his life, impacting and influencing as many people as possible in whatever ways and means as possible, influencing them for good, and for him especially, eternal good. To influence people for eternal good, that was the win of a life well lived. That's the kind of life, he says, that will outlive and outlast you. You will have a crown, he said, that will last forever. And then he goes on to say, and everything else? Not necessarily bad things. Everything else you're running for, all the other wins and accolades, all of the other goals in this life, they're just celery. It's not, and that's not bad. Celery can be good for you, but it's just celery. It will all wilt and go away. There's only one thing that lasts forever, right? And he goes like, that's what I'm running for. That's what I'm running for. How about you? Like, how about me? And so we ended last week with these two questions. The first one is this: what am I doing today that will continue to make a difference tomorrow, with or without me? What am I going to do with my life, and what am I doing today that will actually make a difference tomorrow, in the future, with or without me, and particularly without me, because someday there will be a without me, and there will be a without you. There is a finish line to this race, but am I an outlaster? Are you an outlaster? And here, the race is short. It's often hard fought. It goes by quickly. The finish line approaches more rapidly than we want or anticipate. And when I finish the race of my life here, what will I have passed on to those coming behind me that is worth carrying on? And that was our second question. What am I passing on that's actually worth carrying on to the ones who are coming behind me? Now, those last two words are actually really important to this series. This whole idea of people who are behind me, fundamental to this series, is something I think about all the time and talk about from time to time, that there are three types of relationships, three kinds of relationships that we all have, and we actually all need three types of relationships. And the first relationship that we have and really need are people who are before us, The people who are before us who know what we don't know, and know what we don't even know we don't know, have gone where we want to go, maybe in their relationship with God, or maybe like their marriage, or their family, or their career, or their business life, or financial life. They've done things that we want to do, or maybe hope to do someday. They've already done those. They're becoming or have become the kind of person that we want to become. They're ahead of us in the race in one area of life or more. And then there are the people who are beside us. And these are the people that we like. We just love being with, because they know about how much we know, and they're dumb in the ways that we're dumb, right? But they're struggling in some of the similar ways that we're struggling with, and they're going where we want to go. They're heading in that direction, and those are our travel partners. Those are the people who are journeying alongside of us. And then there are people who are behind us, people who haven't come quite as far. They haven't figured that out yet. They haven't had to fight through that yet. They haven't had to struggle through that yet. So they haven't learned what you've learned in one or more areas of life. And these are people, this is someone that I can reach back and hand back something to them and say, hey, let me help you through that. Hey, I had to navigate that. Here, let me show you where the path is, how to get over that obstacle. Let me show you. I've had to do that before. Things that I've learned and have been passed on to me, and now I'm passing them on to somebody else. And we need all three of these relationships. We need all three of them for different reasons. They provide different things for us. The people who are before us help show us the way. It's like they've been to a place on the map that we haven't been, and they can kind of give us a piece of their map. And they can say, here's how to work through that kind of thing. I've done that. And then there are the people who are beside us, and they help us shoulder the load, right? These are the friends who provide support and encouragement. That word means to put courage in someone. And it seems like they put courage in us when we're around them, and they comfort us. And these are the folks that we're kind of working through what we're learning together. They're in about the same stage of life, maybe. We're working through and we can pray for one another, and we can hold one another's feet to the fire, right? And push one another on. And then we really need people who are behind us. We need people who are behind us where we can share a little bit of our map, where we can extend grace and wisdom and maybe a little bit of expertise or some experience or patience as it was extended to us at one point, because in sharing what we have received, we grow. In fact, there is a lot of evidence for that. And in fact, many of us already know that when you pass on something that you're learning, you actually integrate it more thoroughly. You learn it more holistically, and your capacity actually increases. It is important to have all three. It's important to know who's who. It's important to know that you're not taking relationship advice from the person who's fallen down the relationship mountain 5 times, right? You want to take your relationship advice from the person who's bagged the peak. Like, you've been there. I'm going to listen to you, and you're great with money, but I'm not listening to you. I'm not telling my wife what you're telling me I should tell my wife. And we know that it's like important to know who's who, right? We need all three. It's important to know who's who, and it's important to be passing on what we have received, what's been passed on to us, to those who are coming behind us, maybe a stride or two or a mile or two. It's what it means to be an outlaster. And it's one of the things that I just love about a community like this. I mean, seriously, over the long arc of my life and my family's life, the many years in this community, just the abundance of opportunities that I and my kids and my wife have had to have people who are ahead of us, who have wisdom and experience that we don't have, and the camaraderie and encouragement and mutual edification of people who are right beside us, and the ability that we all have to turn around and pass on what we've received to somebody else who's coming behind it is part of what makes it so beautiful to be a community that's like serving and giving just a bit of our time and our resources to pass on what's been passed on to us. And there are people in this room who've done that to me and to my family, to my kids for years and years and years. And there's something that's just beautiful about that. That's just beautiful. And I hope you will find your ways to do that, because we all need all three of these kinds of relationships. But in order to effectively pass on something that's worth carrying on, in order to effectively pass on something that's worth carrying on to really anybody at all, I need to run the race of my life well and finish the race of my life well, because remember, the win is always defined by the end. It doesn't matter how you started or what the middle was. The win is really defined by the end. And as we're going to talk about this a little bit next week, don't miss next week, people are usually defined not necessarily by their finest chapter, but often by their final chapter. And I want to make sure I want to finish the race of my life well. And to finish well, you will need something that research shows is an increasingly short supply. And that is resilience. Resilience, which Merriam-Webster defines as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. I love a definition that Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant give to resilience. In their book Option B, the subtitle to this book is great: Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. And Sheryl was a COO at Facebook. She lost her husband at a very young age, just shattered her. Adam Grant is a friend of hers who is actually a university professor, best-selling author, a psychologist, and so forth. And they write this book together, and they define resilience. I like this. They define resilience as the strength and speed of our response to adversity. The strength and speed of our response to adversity. And then they go on to say, and we can build it. It is not a set mark in our lives. We can build this. We can grow the strength and speed of our response to adversity. But unfortunately, there is only one way to build it. There is only one way to build it. And to get at this, today we're going to take a look at some very famous words written by a very famous guy. His name, he was famous actually in his own day, famous still today. His name is James. And James had an even more famous brother. His brother was Jesus. That's right. His brother was Jesus. Hello. And James was raised with Jesus. Can you imagine that? Sharing a room together. James did not follow Jesus as his rabbi or teacher or Lord or leader. He did not believe in Jesus, and I can understand why. Can you imagine having like the perfect brother? I mean, you think Jan Brady had it tough? Like the perfect brother, really? And then he heads off like at around 30 years old, and he's doing these amazing things, and there are crowds everywhere singing his praises. And the only thing we have on record in the biographies of Jesus, of James ever saying, is this snarky, sarcastic comment that he makes to Jesus. He is not a fan. And then his brother Jesus is brutally and publicly executed, murdered, beaten to a pulp, and nailed to a Roman cross. And history tells us, by the way, not just the Bible, but history tells us that James then, after that, becomes the leader of the Jesus community in the city of Jerusalem, the epicenter of the Jesus movement. James becomes one of the most outspoken and influential followers of Jesus in the first century world, and he writes a letter. And I just think, I'm just going to say this, I don't know what you've been reading lately, but you have access to a letter written by the brother of Jesus. That's pretty cool. I think you should read his letter. It's the early 60s, not the 1960s, like the original 60s. It's right before the civil war that erupts in Jerusalem that results in the city being torn down. And he writes this letter, and he begins this letter. I'm going to start here just because it's so fascinating to me. He begins the letter, James, a servant of God, that's not surprising, and a servant of the Lord Jesus, the Messiah, or Christ. Now, real quick question, then we'll move on. What would it take for you to come to the point where you consider your brother your Lord and you his servant, and you believe that he is God's Messiah, the Christ? What would have to happen? And so, like, if you're like me, I love my brother. Nothing could ever convince me of that. Nothing. There is nothing that would bring me to that point. And eyewitness testimony says that James saw his brother die on that cross and then saw him alive afterwards. You're like, well, yep, that just might do it. I mean, it would have to be something like that. To me, James's life and the transformation that takes place in his life, to me, is one of the most convincing proofs, historically speaking, of Jesus' actual resurrection from the dead. Anyway, so that's how he starts it. And here's his opening line. And his opening line, this is just so powerful. Here's how he opens his letter. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you are surrounded by trials of many kinds. Whenever you, and he's writing in Greek, the term he uses there is this idea of like falling into something and just being utterly encompassed by it. When you are surrounded by and you are encompassed by trials and tests and adversity, things that are testing your mettle, things that you are struggling to your core with. And as James writes this, he is not speaking hypothetically. This is not like, think or imagine this might happen to you. James lives in difficult times. He lived in difficult times. He faced adversity his entire life. Following the crucifixion of Jesus, Jerusalem became a very hostile place for Jesus' followers. We can imagine that to be true. The same people who killed Jesus are still ruling the city, and many powerful people opposed this movement. The members of this movement were frequently arrested. Some of them were actually killed. James saw people that he loved and cared about murdered because they were following Jesus. And the whole thing created really some serious economic challenges for them all. Doing business, like working, buying, selling, they were treated as outsiders. And so they became poorer and poorer. Meanwhile, there's this civil war brewing. During this time, the late 50s and early 60s, there's growing violence with Rome. There's growing violence with the ruling elite. And then in the late 50s, a terrible famine hit the entire region and rocked the world. And people are now struggling just to eat, to find food. And James is trying to pastor. He's trying to pastor or lead this community of Jesus followers through crisis after crisis after crisis. And when he talks about being surrounded by trials and adversity of many kinds, he's talking real life. He's talking the kind of real life that some of you have known and experienced, like how it feels when you just get hit by one thing after another, one wave after another, and the moment you start to catch your breath, it takes you down again, and you start to go, you know what I mean, to that dark place, that funk, that dark cloud, and it's surfacing all this stuff that you don't even maybe notice. Like there's fear, and there's anger, there's frustration, your inadequacy, your desire to control, but you can't control, and you become maybe short-fused, perhaps, or you just want to eject and walk away and throw in the towel, or maybe you're considering even worse, or have considered even worse. And James says, I want you to do something else. In that moment, hit by another wave, I want to challenge you to consider it joy. I want to challenge you to determine to think, to consider, to judge differently, to evaluate what is happening in your life through a different frame. Work with me here, just quite possibly, a frame of joy, to which I think we would all say, what? That's stupid. Like, what? Are you kidding me, James? You don't even know my story. Thank you for your letter, but now you can sit down and give me the microphone, because if I tell you what has gone and you want to say, consider joy, like, are you kidding me? I mean, is this denial? Is this emotional inauthenticity? Is it some kind of repression? Jesus would say, no. It's better than that. It's deeper and way more profound than that. Joy is not happiness. Joy is not shiny, happy people. Joy is a deep internal response. And here's why you can do that. Because, he says, because you know that the testing of your faith, and James knows what you know, that when you're struck by hardship and loss and pain and adversity, especially when it's one after the other, it tests your faith, doesn't it? It tests your faith. It tests your confidence and your trust in the goodness and the purposes of God. It tests what your faith is made of. And James is using language here that alludes to a very common metaphor in the ancient world of adversity being kind of like a refiner's fire, like the refining of gold or silver or metal. And you probably know what the process looks like. So gold ore is taken out of the ground, right? And it's impure. It's mixed with rocks and other minerals and such. And so they heat it up to 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot. They heat it up, and everything under that much heat just begins to melt away. And the dross and the impurities come to the surface so that they can be scraped off and cleaned away until, legends would say, the refiner can see the image of his face in the gold. Isn't that kind of a cool picture? In other words, the heat, the fire, brings to the surface what's already inside. Like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, it brings out what's inside of us, which is something we are all very much inclined to be in total denial about. Like, I don't know where this is coming from, and you did this to me, and the circumstances did this to me. That wasn't in there. No, it actually was. It was in some form or another, that anger, that fear, that inclination to hurt others with your tongue when you're feeling hurt. Whatever that was, it's surfacing something that's actually in there. The pressure, the heat, the fire just brought it out. And you know why? The refiner applies all that heat to the gold? Because he already knows it's in there. He already knows what it's made of, and he's not surprised or put off by it at all. In fact, he wants to bring it out. He wants to bring it to the surface so he can deal with it, so he can remove it and make something beautiful. And James says, here's why. You might begin considering the hardships and adversity and struggles in your life through a different lens, because like the testing of gold or silver or metal results in a stronger and more valuable and more pure version of the metal, in the same way, the testing of your faith produces something. It produces something beautiful. It produces perseverance, grit, determination, resilience, the strength of character that stands in the face of adversity, in the face of that wave as it hits me and takes me under again, with some courage and a little bit of optimism and some faith and some hope that doesn't cave in, that doesn't give up, the strength and speed of my response to hardship and setback and losses, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Now, you can experience hardship and never build resilience. But you cannot build resilience without experiencing hardship. For a long time, researchers have studied the effect of hardship and trauma on people, and how some people seem to endure great suffering and great trauma. But lately, in the last decade or so, researchers have been studying how some people seem to not only endure it, but actually to get better. They actually grow stronger and better from it. In fact, Jonathan Haidt in New York University's Stern School of Medicine, he's a social psychologist and a prolific author. In his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, he talks about the uses of adversity to grow our character and really to build deeper happiness and joy in our lives. And he says there's one line of thinking that goes a little like this: adversity can produce growth. He says that's actually well proven, well established as a fact. But there's another line of thinking. Another line of thinking he calls the adversity hypothesis. And he says, in this line of thinking, people must endure adversity to grow. Not just they could grow with it, they actually must endure it in order to grow, and that the highest levels of growth and development are only open to those who have faced and overcome great adversity. Let me say that again. People must endure adversity in order to grow at all, and the highest levels of growth and development are only open to those who have faced and overcome great adversity. Adversity, overcoming it, getting through it, he says, can build a strength of character, a capacity for intimacy, or for empathy and intimacy, a sense of self-efficacy, which is that I can voice that we have or don't have. I can do this, I can get through this, I can make this. I can, that self-efficacy, that adversity and hardship and pain and loss, and then getting through it and working through it and overcoming it, can build that in a way that it cannot be developed without. But adversity does not automatically do that. It does not automatically lead to growth. Nietzsche once said, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," to which Haidt says, yeah, but sometimes what doesn't kill you cripples you. and it crushes you, and it wounds your spirit, and it weakens your faith and your resolve. The growth, Haidt said, the growth actually depends on something that we can learn to do. It depends on how we see, how we frame, and how we respond. And James, he says, I want to give you this. I want to give you this. I want to give you this frame. And he knows the power of it because he's experienced it in his own life. He says, there is a choice in how we see, consider what we consider, and there is a choice in how I respond to actually, this is going to sound crazy, lean into the hardship for the moment. Not loving it, not happy about it at all, but actually leaning in to that grief or that struggle in the moment to allow my character to grow. And so James says so let perseverance finish its work. Consider it in a different way and respond to it with a different response where you are allowing resilience to grow and mature you. In other words, God is at work in you. And God is still for you, even in the middle of this, doing something in you. And you can hit the eject button, and you can hit the run and hide button, and you can hit the I don't need this or you anymore button. I'm out of here. You can hit the porn button, or the alcohol button, or the weed button, or the self-righteous blame defect. It's not my fault. Did you see what she did button? And you can pull away from God in the middle of it, and many do. Many do. I've seen many push the eject button. You've seen people do that. Some of you have done that at times in your life where as pain and adversity came into your life, you began to pull away from God and throw in that towel. And James has seen that as well. And James says, wait. Before you do that, I understand, but before you just try to get out of this or make this go away, consider how you might actually grow through it. Let it finish its work in you. Before you just move on, God is up to something. God is up to something good in you, and the adversity in our lives is the adversities in our lives are often the focal point of God's activity in our lives. The adversity in your life is often the focal point of something that God is up to in your life. The greatest struggles in my life. The greatest struggles in your life, that relationship challenge that you don't even want to deal with, that conversation you do not want to have, you just want it to go away, that struggle that your child is facing or your parent or a loved one, that health issue, that financial issue, the greatest struggles in your life can be like this 2,100 degree Fahrenheit heat that's actually starting to melt some of the ore away, some of the facades away, some of the defense mechanisms away, and that can actually be a moment in your life that becomes a focal point of something that God actually wants to do in your life if you let it. If you actually let perseverance finish its work. So rather than running from it, James says, and rather than fearing it and just praying to get out of it, what if you were to let perseverance finish its work so that, he says, you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. In other words, you would become whole. You would become like the best possible version of yourself, the wisest, most emotionally healthy, relationally healthy, intellectually healthy, the best possible version of yourself so that you can become mature and complete, not lacking anything. We're like, well, that sounds amazing. Like, I want to be that person. How do we become that? Oh, you just let perseverance finish the work. And anything else? Like, is there another path to mature and complete, not lacking anything? And James would say, unfortunately, it's hardship. It's hardship, and it's letting perseverance and resilience do its work in us that makes us deeper, more mature, more emotionally healthy, stronger, more aware people. And it's enduring hardship with that faith and that courage that deepens our faith and our courage and our confidence in God. So, if that's true, just hypothetically speaking, what if over the next few weeks, or whatever it is you're facing, whatever it is you are wanting to frankly just get out of, What if instead of just praying, God, get me out of this, I just want out of this situation, can you please bring this to an end? Can you please just finish this? Can you give me over this? And there's nothing wrong with praying that prayer, by the way. What if you also, just in addition to that, began praying, and until you do, teach me what you want to teach me. Until this is over, until I'm through this, grow me and mature me the way you want to grow me and mature me. Please don't let me go through this without learning what I need to learn, without seeing what I need to see, without changing things in me that I need to change, dealing with things I need to deal with. I want to let perseverance finish its work in me through this even more than I want to get through this. Now, that's a different frame. Whether or not you were to ever adopt that frame, I think we would all agree that's different. That would be a different frame through which to see very painful and horrible things that are happening in my life. Now, James is a realist. In fact, if there is any document in the New Testament from the followers of Jesus that is more pragmatic and realistic, I mean, this is it. And he knows how hard that is. He knows that in that moment, and in this moment right now, what we really need, what we really lack is wisdom. What we need, what we want is out. What we need, what we lack is wisdom. And he says, if any of you in this moment, in this struggle, lacks what you need, which is wisdom, you should ask God. If any of you have found yourself to have fallen into and are suddenly just encompassed by so many struggles and adversities and trial, and you were going along, you had your plans and your hopes and dreams, and you knew how things were going to turn out, and then you got blindsided by the Mack truck of adversity, and now everything is upside down, and you don't know what to do, and it doesn't seem like there's anything you can do. You can't seem to control what's going on. What you want and are praying for are answers and resolution and to get out. But what you need, he says, is wisdom. What you need is wisdom. And James says, here's what you do. Here's what you do in order to let perseverance complete its work. Ask God for wisdom in the middle of this. Now, here's what he means by wisdom. There's a long ancient tradition within the Hebrew scriptures of what wisdom is, and it's essentially this. Wisdom is the perspective to see my current circumstances in a broader context, and it's the ability to apply that perspective to my decisions and daily actions. Wisdom is the perspective I need to see my current circumstances in a broader context, and then the strength, the ability, the capacity to apply that broader context and perspective to what I'm going through right now. That's wisdom. And parents in the room, like, you get this, right? So maybe you have young children right now, maybe you've had them, but you know what, like your kids, like a preteen, junior high, whatever, maybe high school, they come to you so distraught. I mean, because something has happened in their friend group, or there's something you won't let them wear, or someplace you won't let them go, and it is the end of the world. Am I right? It's like, my life is over. It's not worth going on. Anyone ever experienced that with their kids? Just me. Okay. And you, because you're a good parent, you try to act all concerned and empathetic, like, oh yeah, I know. And then you walk away and think, I wish that was my problem. I wish that was the biggest struggle that I have. Why? Because you have like a 35 or a 45 or a 55-year-old worldview. And they have a 5 or a 10 or a 15-year-old worldview, and they cannot see what you see. They cannot see what they're in through the lens that you see it through. And then there's God and God's worldview. And just imagine if in that moment, your little preteen daughter or your junior high son would say, Mom, just help me see as you see. That's never going to happen. That would never happen, because you're blind as a bat and they see clearly. But just imagine, they were to go to my mom, I just need to see as you see. And now imagine if you were to say, God, I just need to see as you see. Help me to see as you see. I need wisdom. I need wisdom. I need a bigger context. For what is happening, what you're up to in the world, what you're up to in my relationships, my character, my life. I'm not asking you necessarily to even change it. I don't want to run through it, but give me the wisdom to see it as you see it, so I can do as you would do would you give me the wisdom to see as you see? And James says you can pray that prayer. You can pray that prayer full of faith, that is the kind of prayer God loves to answer, because God loves to give wisdom generously, and he will not find fault in you, and that wisdom will be given to you in the heat of that moment. And then James just keeps going. Now, what he says next is just so good. It'd be fun, because he starts riffing on this ancient story from the Hebrew scriptures in Genesis, and it's just so good. But we'll put a pin in it for now. Maybe we'll come back to what he says at another time. But here's the deal. Eventually, you will be on the other side of whatever you're going through. Eventually, this hardship, this season, this struggle, this loss, this grief, you will be on the other side of it, either because it has ended or you have. But you will someday be on the other side of it. Before you get there, though, before you are too eager to just get there, here's a question for you. Who will you be on the other side of it? Who will you be when the dust has settled and you've made it through? Who will you be on the other side? What will you have learned? How will I have grown? Will I be a healthier, better, more mature version of myself because I let perseverance finish its work in me? That's resilience. Resilience. And you cannot win the race of this life without it. You cannot finish well without it, because resilience is what drives us to keep moving our feet. But here's the thing. Resilience isn't just something you want to build in yourself. And you do, whether you know it or not. You really want resilience. But resilience is something that Outlasters pass on. It's something that they help build up in the people who are coming behind them and the people who are around them and beside them, perhaps in a way that was not even passed on to them. And there's been a lot of research in the last 10 or so years that's a little bit concerning about this. There has been a noticeable drop or decline or loss of resilience, self-efficacy, that's the I can do this voice, and the internal locus of control, similar to that. There's been a noticeable loss or drop in the population over the last 40 years, especially in the two youngest generations, what are sometimes referred to as the millennials and Gen Z. And one of the greatest causes of this significant drop is parents. It's parents. In fact, Dr. Tim Elmore is an expert in this field. I pretty much love everything he writes. I love all of his videos. He did a TED Talk. It's like all good. He's just so sharp. He's so good. I highly recommend his book, 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. But I want to summarize just very briefly a few of his big ideas. He says, the problem with parents, he says, and I'm just going to give you 3 of them. He says, we risk too little, we risk too little, we rescue too quickly, and we reward too easily. We risk too little, we rescue too quickly, we reward too easily. He says, here's the thing. Most of us were raised riding bicycles without helmets, rolling around in the back seats of the backs of station wagons and pickup trucks, climbing monkey bars, and staying out until the street lights came on. And then something happened. With our generation of parents, with us, we changed, and we gave our 6-year-old cell phones because just in case they might want to get a hold of us, like God help them if they don't have us immediately online in that moment. And we wrapped them in bubble wrap and stuck helmets on their heads, and we removed the monkey bars from playgrounds. They don't even exist anymore because they're dangerous. Now, I need to say this. I am a fan of seatbelts. I wear them. I am a fan of being wise, though I am not a particular fan of the word safe. I really do love wise, but danger and risk and failure and pain are actually necessary for the brain development of children, and especially the development of self-efficacy. It's why your toddler instinctively wants to climb those stairs, even as you keep sticking gates in front of them and taking them off the stairs, because there's something in their tiny little brain that says, I must overcome this. Will you let them? We risk too little, we rescue too quickly. We come to their rescue as soon as there's a struggle. They will never have to figure it out. We will figure it out for them. We leave work to bring them lunch when they forgot it at home. We stay up all night finishing the science project that they didn't get to. In fact, Tim Elmore says, There's a sign on a school wall that that his organization works with that he noticed. He walked in the front doors, and there's a sign addressing parents that you see the moment you walk in the door, and it says, Dear parents, if you're bringing in your son or daughter's forgotten lunch, science project, or gym shorts, please turn around and exit the building. Your child will learn to problem solve in your absence. Isn't that great? We did this. Our generation of parents did this to our children. We risk too little, we rescue way too quickly, and he says we reward too easily. These are the generations raised with participation trophies and without red pens in schools. Because a child might get their feeling, we don't want them to feel bad, we want them to be happy. And we have prioritized their happiness over their readiness. We have prioritized their immediate happiness over their long-term or ultimate readiness. And Tim says, we give them what they should earn. We give them what they should earn, and they never actually have to fight for it. And so he's got like all of these stories and all this evidence. When kids in this generation try and then fail, they give up very quickly. That's where the test scores and resilience, I can't do this is stupid. I can't do this. Do those words sound familiar? Now, here, I'll just say this. At this point, we could just go off on a whole talk on parenting for resilience. That's not this series. That's another series. Maybe we should do that. I highly recommend the book. But in short, here's the deal. If you can't build resistance without overcoming adversity, and you can't, neither can they. Neither can they. And their adulthood is actually more important than their childhood and will last a whole lot longer. So don't parent for their happiness. Parent for their readiness. Or here's how I put it. We need to focus, and this is just my little side thing for parents, we need to focus less on today's happiness and more on tomorrow's readiness. We need to focus less on today's happiness, more on tomorrow's readiness, and I want to pass that on. I want to pass it on not just to my children. I want to pass it on not just to the next generation. I want to pass it on to those who are around me, those who are coming behind me, because that is worth carrying on. If I want to run a race, the race of this life and win, I need to build resilience. But resilience isn't just something I need in order to run the race well. It's something I want to pass on to those who are beside and behind me. Now, we'll pick it up right there next week as we talk about a second quality that is absolutely essential to passing on what's worth carrying on. But as we close, I want to bring us back to that prayer that James talked about, to what he said we should ask God for, that prayer for resilience, for wisdom. And the prayer is simply this: God, give me the wisdom to see as you see. Give me the wisdom to see as you see. And so here's what I'd like you to do. Would you just take a moment and close your eyes and bow your heads with me? And as you think about things that are happening in your life, or perhaps happening in the lives of people who are very close to you, would you pray this prayer? God, give me the wisdom to see as you see. I'm asking for wisdom. Give me the wisdom to see this challenge that's in front of me, this barrier, this obstacle, this loss, this setback, this relationship that I don't want to deal with, this conversation I don't want to have. Give me the wisdom to see that as you see it. Give me the wisdom to see me as you see me. Just ask him for that. As the refiner who sees what's coming to the surface, and you just want to deal with that and make me a more pure version of myself, to see the people around me the way you see them, the people who I'm living with and are frustrating me and underreacting or overreacting. Would you give me the wisdom to see them, to see the world as you see it, the pain and the hurt that you want to mend, the places where you're at work? Would you give me the wisdom to see as you see, to take the next steps that are in front of me? Heavenly Father, we want to get through this. We do. We want to get out of this. We want it to be over. But even more, we actually want to grow. Just for this moment at least, we want to grow through this. So teach us, purify us, grow us, deepen us. We want your perseverance to finish its work so that we can be mature and complete, lacking nothing. So we ask for wisdom, trusting that you will give it to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, John. Hey, thank you so much for being here tonight, for us gathering together. Just a couple of ways that what we're doing tonight can outlast this experience even. The first is just by sharing it with friends and family, or enjoying it again on YouTube. We just like to make a reminder from from time to time to let you know that's always there, past series, et cetera, et cetera. So you can share that. We mentioned earlier the Connect card, and for if this is your first, second, or third time, we're going to make a donation in your honor as you fill that out to South County Outreach, our neighbors next door, and all the great stuff that they're doing just constantly. As you know, things are becoming a little bit hairy for some people and difficult, so this is one of the ways that we connect and partner with them. There are others too that come up from time to time. So, and then the serve brochure that we mentioned, this is a great opportunity. We really believe in serving around here. We really believe in getting in the game and not just being an observer, but being a participant in what's happening here at Terra Nova. So I want to encourage you to fill that out. You can drop it in the basket on your way out, or you can sign up online as well. And just let us know how you're going to get involved. And then lastly, just by giving out of the abundance that we've been given, this is our opportunity with weekly giving to just share God's goodness and the resources that He's given to us to just create something beautiful in South Orange County here. And it doesn't happen because of one person or 10 people or 100 people. It happens because all of us come together to do something great. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and we'll see you next week for part 3 of Outlasters. Have a great Saturday night, a great Sunday, and a great week ahead. We'll see you then.